Welcome and thanks for joining us for this webinar about how to manage Apple OS upgrades in 2019. My name is Garrett and I'm part of the product team here at Jamf, specifically focusing on Jamf Pro. And today we are going to walk through a lot of content. It actually won't be specific just to Jamf Pro. We'll cover all of the new operating systems coming from Apple, as well as how that impacts the Jamf product portfolio. So with that, why don't we dive in? I want to begin with a quick update on Jamf. If you've been around a long time since the company was founded or since we were offering Casper Suite years ago, or if you're brand new, this is going to be a great way just to understand how Jamf is evolving and growing and what the future looks like for our company. So Dean Hager, our CEO, says it best: the spirit of that original iMac commercial, that there is no step 3, is what we live for here at Jamf. And if you remember that commercial from 15, 20 years ago, that's really what we've been striving for almost as long, about 17 years as of recording, striving to make it as easy as opening the box, powering on that device, and there is no step 3. We've actually given out post-it notes in the past at some of our user conferences that say there is no step 3 as we continue to chase that here at Jamf. And speaking of 17 years ago, you can look back to the early days of Jamf when we had 13 team members in 2007, one of the earliest existing photos of the company. Well, over 1,100 team members here today as of recording in August 2019. Obviously, a very exciting growth path for us. We've really been fortunate to get to know a lot of you on this journey. And if we kind of dive into the numbers, today more than 30,000 customers rely on Jamf, more than 15 million devices under management with Jamf solutions. So it's an exciting time to be a part of the Jamf family, is what I'm demonstrating here. And if you're in the enterprise, you can look around and know that you're in good company. Some of the largest banks, technology companies, and frankly, just largest companies in general continue to trust and choose Jamf for managing Apple at scale. So I'll end this section, this brief Jamf update, with a quote from Fletcher. I find Fletcher to be someone that is just really intelligent and on the forefront of how you manage IT at scale. IBM, of course, a massive multinational company. And Fletcher had something really interesting to say when he joined us at the Jamf Nation User Conference a couple of times. In fact, he's been on stage there. So Fletcher said, "We're deploying more Macs every month, but not requiring more help staff to support these users. This is critical. And in the story of managing operating system upgrades, it can be a very time-intensive task, very labor-intensive, to understand the new operating systems, to communicate that to your staff, and then ultimately to execute on that vision." But when we look at Fletcher and how he's leading that role as CIO at IBM, you can see he's taking the same number of heads, but managing more Apple devices, more Macs at scale without additional staff support. This is critical in the story you'll see here today, and for you as you leave this webinar and think about your role heading forward. So to dive into the future of Apple operating systems, we need to take a step into the past. WWDC 2019, the Apple Worldwide Developers Conference, taking place in June in California, right there next to their global headquarters in Cupertino, just south in San Jose. So Jamf was, of course, on site. I think a lot of you were on site as well if you're a developer for the Apple platform or any of the Apple platforms. You might have been joining us there. It was a really exciting year, though. We started to hear leading up to the event that this would be a pretty big one, a pretty significant WWDC, and that held true. It really was a big and exciting event. In particular, we took away a number of things. New operating systems, of course, always top of mind for these annual events. Tons of new software changes, though. You'll see some of that here today. Changes in how we manage devices at scale, leveraging software, leveraging the MDM spec, and of course, security and privacy were front and center. Apple has really taken this stance of being forward with security, forward with user privacy, balancing those two things, but finding a path where organizations are secure, users can protect their privacy, and moving ahead, you can keep those two goals aligned as you deploy more Apple devices at scale. So 3 themes really grew out of all of the updates at WWDC this year. There was a ton of content, like I mentioned, but 3 things really drove home as the key takeaways from this year's event: user enrollment, enrollment customization, and single sign-on. Now we're going to dive into each of these one at a time here and show you what it is and how that looks in the Jamf Pro user interface. But just be aware that our entire portfolio of products is interacting with these 3 pillars in different ways. And as we dive in further into the MDM spec, configuration profiles, commands, things like that, we are also interacting across the Jamf portfolio. I'll use a lot of examples from Jamf Pro because most of our attendees are from Jamf Pro today, but feel free to take this knowledge and dive into the user help center for your individual Jamf product. If you're a Jamf Now user, welcome. You're going to leave with some great tactical information. If you're an educator with Jamf Now, welcome. Again, you will leave with some great tactical knowledge about what's changing and how you can manage that going forward. So let's dive in. So user enrollment is a very powerful feature. This is something that is evolving the BYOD story. You'll see this on that first bullet point there, also known as personal device management, into something new. Apple is evolving what used to be, I'll bring a device, we'll call it BYOD, and it's kind of the Wild West, into a much more formalized, managed, and protected environment. So this new term, user enrollment, it's brand new. It's brand new to Apple, it's brand new to Jamf. And you will see this in the Jamf Pro UI immediately. In fact, with Jamf Pro 10.15, we were rolling out support proactively for user enrollment. So we expect this to come with Catalina, of course, for macOS. If you're a Jamf School user, you'll enjoy managing that on macOS with Jamf School. If you're a Jamf Pro user, you'll enjoy managing this on iOS as well. So this is a really exciting time to be an IT admin managing devices that people are bringing into the workplace. If they're saying, I bought a device outside of my IT budget, outside of what work would provide, maybe it's an iPad and we don't provide those at work. Well, I went out and bought one because I love iPad and I wanted to use maybe the new Apple Pencil 2, right? And now I want to bring that into the workplace and I want work email support. I want to be able to see my chat messages. Maybe we use Slack and I want to use Slack on that device to stay on top of things as I'm traveling. Well, the great news is with user enrollment, we have a way that is more secure and more private to balance those 2 things to bring that device into the workplace. On the security front, it's a more formalized structure. So what used to be BYOD and would really vary from MDM provider to MDM provider is much more formalized today. Now, I'm really proud to say that Jamf led the industry in this respect. We proactively limited BYOD management. We limited what the IT admin could see and do on those devices a couple of years ago. So we were way ahead of the market in that regard. As we move into user enrollment, not a lot is changing. It's becoming more formal, but some of those protections for user privacy, we've already been doing that. So we are adopting this new feature and workflow from Apple, but really, as a Jamf Pro customer, you're not going to see a ton change, and that is really great news. So it's available today in preview. I want to show you what that looks like within Jamf Pro 10.15. So let's dive in. Within the Jamf Pro dashboard here, I'm seeing kind of the overview of what I can do within this product, right? And if you're brand new, this is a sample dashboard with some smart groups at the top for computers, which is the term for, of course, macOS machines, macOS computers at the top there, and then policy statuses at the bottom. This is customizable, so feel free to dive into that, but we're going to begin right here by clicking on that gear and moving into our settings page. I'll then click on Global Management and dive in to User-Initiated Enrollment as my second step. You might have never been in this menu before. Perhaps this is brand new for you. Have no fear. We are going to walk through User-Initiated Enrollment as a menu together right now. Now, the first thing I'll do is look at the menu bar at the top. General, Messaging, Platforms, Access, and I'll click on Platforms to begin. Then we'll move on down to iOS. Again, we are within Jamf Pro, where user enrollment is available for iOS devices at launch, right? So we're going to click on iOS, and then we'll move on down to enrollment method. Now you can see personal device profiles listed below, and that is not going away. In fact, we are adding a new option, but not taking anything away for now. So it is really going to be kind of your choice. Do you want to use personal device profiles, which we've had for a long time in Jamf Pro? More power to you. If you'd like to stick with PDP, that's totally fine. If you'd like to preview and adopt user enrollment, this brand new feature that is very powerful and more streamlined from Apple, feel free to also try that here. In fact, if I click on that blue dot, you might have seen this. This is Jamf Engage. This is our in-product messaging system. I'll click on that blue dot, and you'll be given this. So kind of an overview of what user enrollment is, when it appeared, iOS 13, iPadOS 13, user enrollment, brand new. And it shows you in the middle here a little message from my team and from the product management team, which is be aware. This piece of the product, this feature, is in preview, so not all functionality is available. We're also recommending two things. One, do not enroll a large number of devices. You might see some weird conflicts there as you enroll, let's say, hundreds of devices or more. So avoid doing that for now while this is still in preview. And also just a reminder, preview does mean preview. So we really recommend you do not use this on actual production devices. Grab a few test devices, enroll them using user enrollment, check it out, get a feel for it. It's going to come out of preview very soon, so be ready for that. But at this point, I would not put any production devices into user enrollment just yet. So a final reminder, the preview state is active today. We're, of course, looking to remove that in the near future as we evolve user enrollment going forward. We do have a roadmap for this, a very exciting plan, so do look for more communication from Jamf on user enrollment in the near future here. So the second pillar, enrollment customization, pillar number 2 coming out of WWDC this year, this is really more secure automated enrollment. So that workflow of doing automated enrollment as an end user, it's becoming more secure. Well, why do we say that? Why is it becoming more secure, and why do I care about security as a part of enrollment? Well, what this does is twofold. One, I can create some nice customized messaging, rich media support, things like that, built into the enrollment workflow. That's exciting, and I think it really makes it a more personal and customized experience. But the second piece is pretty critical as well, and that's the ability to tie in an identity provider directly into enrollment. So as I'm enrolling, I will log in, featuring multi-factor authentication support. I'll log into my MFA provider, sign in one time, and that multi-factor will automatically authenticate me across applications right there during the enrollment workflow. This is really powerful because it streamlines automated enrollment even further. I think in the ideal future for a lot of us, we have a very simple, very streamlined enrollment workflow. We want brand new users, whether they've been on an Apple device or not, to be able to pick up that device and very quickly get to work. Well, this is one way that we are driving that vision home, making it closer to reality. Now, the caveat here is that there is a bridge, kind of a connective tissue between Jamf and Apple that we're waiting on, and that's the identity provider. So look for news from your preferred identity provider in the future, that they have supported enrollment customization. Apple provided the framework, Jamf provided the support on our platforms. Now we need that middle piece for the identity provider to support it as well. But once that's in play, we are ready to go. From day zero, when that IDP, that identity provider, supports this new framework from Apple, we are off to the races and ready to rock. So what does it look like? And how do we set up enrollment customization within Jamf Pro? Well, again, within the settings menu, we will click on Global Management and then click on Enrollment Customization over on the right. Now, the good news is once I'm within enrollment customization, I've got a few options, but it's fairly streamlined. And I also have two types of panes. You can see on that header there within the green box, it says pane type. Now, what's it referring to with a pane? The pane is actually called a pre-stage pane. And this is to mirror language you'll see with Apple, but pre-stage panes are the actual things you will build within this new workflow. So if I want to go in and customize enrollment and say, I want my enrollment workflow to be better, more customized, more personal today, what am I doing? Well, I'm going into Enrollment Customization, this new feature, and I'm customizing or building a number of pre-stage panes. That's what you're seeing me do right here. So we'll fill that out. Hey, welcome to Enrollment Customization in pre-stage panes. I can even customize the button text, right? When I'm ready, I will click Add, and that's good to go. And here's a preview of what that'll look like to the end user. I'm seeing this nice bold heading, welcome. I'm seeing some text and the two buttons down below. So today, this is really useful for, again, personalized messaging, customizing what people see when they're joining your company, when they're joining maybe the Apple ecosystem for the first time. Now, going forward, we want to add rich media to this experience as well. You could imagine GIFs, videos, onboarding welcome screens, things like that. This is only going to get more powerful over the next couple of Jamf Pro releases. This is a roadmapped thing. It's already being worked on and on our roadmap, so definitely keep an eye out for some more news around this in the near future. And the final thing I'll say is around single sign-on. So kind of under the umbrella of security and identity together, I want to talk about this new configuration profile, this SSO extension, single sign-on extension configuration profile. And this applies to macOS computers and iOS devices together. What does this look like? Well, we'll go back into Jamf Pro, into the dashboard, click on Configuration Profiles, and then click on New to start a brand new config profile build out, and scroll to the bottom of my options menu. So all the way down, and I'll click on Single Sign-On Extensions. Brand new menu, and we'll begin configuring that right here. Now, you can move through this. I'm not going to show this in the demo here today, but fairly easy to move through and add your identifier, your team identifier, choose your type of SSO, and configure that right here. This is a great way to make Jamf Pro start to become more closely aligned with your SSO provider. So think about leveraging this. If you're already using a single sign-on tool, this is a great way to, again, bring that two pieces of the tech stack closer together than they ever have been before. So folks, a lot of information there. macOS, iOS, iPadOS, tvOS. We've touched on a lot, specifically coming out of WWDC, but I want to dive into the operating systems themselves for just a minute here, beginning, of course, with iPadOS. This is on a lot of our minds because it's brand new, it's very exciting, very shiny stuff, but it raises a lot of questions. So a brand new operating system, the first thing that a lot of us think, and that we're hearing a ton here at Jamf, is iPadOS different? Do I need to manage that differently at scale, excuse me, than I already do these other operating systems? Thankfully, the great news is no. It is almost identical to iPadOS. When you look at how that operating system is built, it's really just a fork of iOS, and they've added some exclusive functionality. Things like a desktop class browsing experience. That's important when you're using this in the workplace. And things like multi-touch support. That's not going to come to iPhone anytime soon, right? It's really not designed as a device. iPhone is not to be that kind of rich productivity tool. On the flip side, iPad absolutely is. And that's why you're seeing this fork between iOS and iPadOS going forward. iOS 13, of course, is the latest version of iOS. This is the world's most popular mobile operating system. A lot going on here, but a few things I want to call out. Dark mode for iOS is just an exciting change to the phone, to the device itself. So you think about how your end users interact with their devices, and if they're tech savvy, how they're hearing about this change coming from Apple. Well, it's exciting, first of all. It's a great time to kind of partner up as IT and be that service organization. But the second thing I'll say is we're seeing a change in how people will begin to authenticate to applications, specifically to sign in to apps using this new sign in with Apple functionality. This will most likely appear most commonly right alongside of sign in with Google and sign in with Facebook. So wherever you see those options, you should expect to see sign in with Apple. This is not intended to be an identity provider. This is really a sign-in tool. So don't think of this as a competitor to something like Okta, right? Any kind of like cloud identity provider. That's not what this is. But you will see this, and you might be asked by your team what it is, if they should use it, how to approach it, maybe as an individual user. Be prepared to talk to that. It's going to be, I think, a big deal. The final thing I'll say on this page is that Face ID is getting faster than ever. If you leverage Face ID at scale as a security feature, you're going to love that because, for one employee, it might save a small amount of time many times across the year, but, across an organization, you are making it not only faster, which saves a bit of time throughout the work year, you're making it a better user experience. So if you've got 1,000 employees all using iOS devices, all using iPhones, running iOS 13 or later, this will be something that just makes that a more positive experience going forward. Now, as we think about managing mobile devices, we've kind of got two avenues here, configuration profiles and MDM commands. So SSO extensions, the configuration profile that we walked through, definitely look into that if that applies to you and your org. If your ears are kind of perking up, now is the time to jump on jamfnation.com, do some exploring, and find out more about that new configuration profile. We're also, of course, seeing new restrictions added. This is something we see all the time with Apple updates, and this is no different. So restrictions really falling into a few different buckets here, but you can get a better idea of how this actually works and how it looks just by diving into Jamf Pro or your Jamf MDM provider. Go to the restrictions menu, track these down, and really kind of give some thought to how you will use these and if they apply, again, to your org. Now, the final thing on operating systems that I want to call out is tvOS 13. Not a ton here that I really want to touch on in this webinar, but you need to be aware that it's coming. It's a change, multi-user support, fresh UI, all exciting stuff. But the critical thing is we need to think of Apple TVs that we have deployed in our orgs. So if you're in a hospital or healthcare institution and you're thinking about, man, we've got Apple TVs all over the place, or perhaps you use them in conference rooms or shared workspaces at your company, that's another great use case as well. Give this some thought. We need to be managing those upgrades for tvOS devices just like we do for iOS and macOS and iPadOS as well. So keep that in mind. So with all of that said around mobile devices, let's dive into computers. macOS Catalina. This is the big one, right? The big upgrade this fall, as usual. Kind of in two different ways, I suppose. iOS, we see a ton of iOS devices, but macOS powering a ton of enterprise functionality. So let's dive into that. I want to begin with this graphic on the right, and this will be one of the most critical things to understand if you work in a security role or you report up to somebody that is security conscious. This is a brand new file system architecture. And what this is doing is it's splitting, like it shows on the screen there, basically all data on that device away from the operating system core. And what this means is that going forward, the core operating system files, Catalina and beyond, they are separated and protected. They are read-only. And what this will do is make it much more difficult for malicious attacks to go in and tweak an operating system, even so that the user doesn't realize what's going on and start to kind of monitor or attack that device in a really negative way. Now, the good news is that was already very hard to do. You remember technology like SIP, System Integrity Protection, that launched way back in El Capitan. That was a really big deal then as well. So El Cap, of course, starting this story, Catalina evolving that story even further. Be aware, file system architecture is changing. The end user impact, though, will be very minor. We're also seeing this continued evolution with PPPC, which is the Privacy Preferences Policy Control. I think I got that right. I question myself every time I say that out loud, but PPPC is of course a relatively new change, and this is letting users know when the system or an application is requesting permission to do something, right? So if one of my, let's say, social networking apps is requesting access to my camera, for example, it'll kind of flag that, show an alert, and say, do you as the end user want to allow that specific permission? Yes or no? That is PPPC in a nutshell. Well, it's continuing to evolve. There's more context around this. I would encourage you to, again, head to Jamf Nation and ask some questions if you're really concerned about that evolution there. Another call out here, and this one is less about you and your teams, it's more about you and your supporting vendors. 32-bit applications are no longer supported when you upgrade to Catalina. I just want to say that again. If you upgrade a Mac OS computer to Catalina, 32-bit applications will not work. So 2 things here. 1, we probably are aware of most applications, I would say, that are core to the business or education environment. Maybe you're aware of 80% of what's being used out there, right? Of all of kind of that core stuff like productivity tools, email, that stuff that we know and we manage. And you'll have an answer pretty quickly on whether that's 64-bit or not. But on the flip side, there are almost certainly going to be small niche software programs or applications that people are using for really specific tasks. When they're using those, we need to be dang sure that they support 64-bit architecture. And if they don't, it's really incumbent on us as the IT admins to be reaching out proactively to those vendors and saying, hey, first of all, do you have a 64-bit version today? If not, will you have one before Catalina drops in October? And if not, then what's your plan? Because if you don't have a plan, we might not have a plan for your application in our environment going forward. So we need to think about this long and hard, folks, when that upgrade takes place. And Catalina is your operating system. 32-bit is a thing of the past. Now, something really cool here for the macOS security story, activation lock for Mac. This, of course, has been on iOS for a while. iOS devices have really been supporting activation lock and enjoying those benefits for a long time. And if you've never used this, maybe you're a macOS power user and you've never used iOS activation lock, here's the summary. What it does is marry a piece of hardware to an Apple ID. So even if somebody steals that device or it's lost, casually left somewhere, and they wipe that device to try to, access it, use it for their own, sell it, that device will reprompt upon restart for that Apple ID and Apple ID password because it is locked down hard. This is a really great way just to give more peace of mind to your organization, that as you adopt Apple, all of those devices have next generation security in mind. Security on the data side, on the software side, but also on the hardware side with things like activation lock. So the great news is for admins, you have a bypass feature. If they are supervised, you can bypass activation lock. So have no worries there, but a very powerful thing that you should look into if you're not using this already. Couple of config profiles and MDM commands here, just quick call outs. I'm not going to go into this too deeply, but just a quick note that the extensions payload, that configuration profile, is different than system extensions and kernel extensions. So be aware of that. And a quick note here on kernel extensions as well. If your app or software, and again, think through your entire deployment, the different teams and use cases, if they're using kernel extensions, you need to talk to your vendor ASAP because macOS Catalina is really the last kind of part of the breed of macOS operating systems that will let kernel extensions run without compromise. Now, will they still run? Yes, but they will begin to be compromised and I think deprecated moving forward. So look into that, talk to vendors, open that channel of communication. Catalina, you're okay, but whatever comes next, it's not going to be the same, and we need to be prepared to understand what our vendors are going to do about that. So let's dive in for a minute a little bit deeper into Catalina itself. There was this really exciting announcement on main stage at WWDC that Apple is launching a native single sign-on extension in the toolbar of Catalina. What does that mean? Well, first of all, that is a ton of information packed into one sentence. What it means is there's this brand new tool that will live in the toolbar on Catalina on macOS computers. So up on the top, you'll see this tiny little thing that's an SSO, a single sign-on extension. Well, what's the purpose of that? The purpose is really to authenticate to Active Directory credentials for certain services you're interacting with as a user. Now, the caveat here, and I'm going to highlight this in orange, is that this is on-premise AD only. Keep this in mind. There's been a ton of confusion around this, and I want to make this really clear to everybody on this webinar. On-premise only, Active Directory only. You need to check those boxes. On-premise AD, if that's true, you're good to go, right? Then this applies to you and there's some value there. If not, if you're leveraging a cloud IDP, then we need to look at a different solution. And we're going to walk through what that looks like here in just a minute. So what does it look like for Catalina to exist alongside of an MDM like Jamf, right? Alongside of one of Jamf's MDMs. Well, MDM supports Catalina, first of all, so Jamf across the board is day zero compatible with macOS Catalina. It also supports custom enrollment. That's really on the MDM, kind of the Jamf side of the house. So the user will authenticate to a cloud identity provider if you're using a cloud IDP. That's you, that's great. That's kind of how they sign in, authenticate, and validate. The user then continues through Setup Assistant. This is during enrollment, very early on in setting up that brand new Mac. They create that local Mac account with any password they want. And that's the call out at the bottom. Catalina is not enforcing credential synchronization, right? So if you've got an IDP in the cloud and you're using Catalina, it is not enforcing the same credentials across that IDP and whatever they create with that Catalina SSO. Maybe that matters to you, maybe that does not matter to you. Think about that and the impact it'll have on kind of how you want users to be managing their accounts in your environment. Jamf Connect on the flip side, of course, brings a little bit of additional value. So you think about the three categories here. There is the Catalina SSO. There's the MDM provider, which is a Jamf MDM tool like Jamf Pro, Jamf Now, Jamf Connect, or Jamf School, excuse me. And then we've got Jamf Connect, which really adds additional value on top of that MDM core. Account provisioning, security management, password sync. You can read about that here. What I want to show is this next slide. This is the breakdown of how do you use these tools and how do they work in sync with each other across a tech stack. Again, if you're leveraging a cloud IDP, that's really a great time to start linking up with Jamf Connect and understanding what does security management and password syncing mean for us. What's the value there? What's the pain there if passwords are not syncing across that local account to our IDP? Why is that a gap that I need to address? So that's Catalina, Jamf Connect, and a Jamf MDM solution. Why don't we dive into doing the upgrades themselves? So tactically, how do we execute on this big, bold goal? Well, we've got a couple of ways to do this, and I'm going to walk through that. But the first thing that I want to answer is, why is this valuable? We talk a ton about day zero compatibility here at Jamf. And what that means is baseline compatibility, new support for key features from the new operating systems, and that it's more than just uploading a profile. This is something that is very extensive, deep into those operating systems, and is ready to rock on the day that a new OS is released. That's a commitment we've made for a very long time here at Jamf, and really it's addressing a couple of things: reducing vulnerabilities, keeping end users happy. They want to use the new OS. We want to empower them to use that new OS. We also keep them productive with the latest changes in macOS, iOS, iPadOS, and tvOS. And speaking of those operating systems, you can see here that all the way through today, and actually, I just noticed here we need to add iPadOS as well. We are day zero compatible for 8 years running. So on the day that these things are released from Apple, Jamf is ready to go. This is a key promise that we've made for years to our customers, and we continue to deliver on that promise. We want to give you time to either immediately, say, all right, staff, the new OS is out, iOS 13, let's rock. Go ahead and upgrade immediately. Or on the flip side, say, we're going to take some time to test and make sure this will not break anything in our environment, right? So wherever you fall on that spectrum of balance between immediately available or taking time to test, Jamf supports those workflows. So what does this look like today? Well, as of recording, iOS 13 is released. It's generally available. It is out in the wild, and Jamf is compatible across the board. Now, moving forward, we've got a few date estimates on here. I actually think iPadOS is moving up to September 24th. That is very recent information, but I think we'll see that drop on September 24th. So yes, we are prepared based on Apple's betas for day zero compatibility once again. The same goes for Catalina when it drops in October, and the same goes for tvOS 13. We've heard that might be September 24th, it might be September 30th. We're expecting it on one of those 2 days, so coming up pretty soon here, again, as of recording. So what do I do? Maybe I'm brand new and you're watching this video, it's your first time through the upgrade cycle. What do I do to get ready, to prepare, and ultimately leverage Jamf to make this as easy as possible? Well, the first thing we do is dive into smart groups. So we're going to scope based on version, and this is probably the easiest way to attack this. I've got a pro tip at the bottom, though, that if you do want to scope based on name, you can do things like scoping based on IP. That'll be a nice, almost like a wild card, if I can use that term here, to be iPhone, iPad, iPod. It'll grab all of those devices if all you do is scope based on IP. So that's a pro tip. What I actually want to show, though, is scoping based on version. So let's dive into Jamf Pro. We're under computers here, of course. We're going to click on Smart Computer Groups and then click on New, create something brand new here from scratch as we build a brand new smart computer group that you can kind of see the existing list. Let's click on New and dive into this menu. So what we're going to do here is scroll down until I see operating system version. So tons of different criteria, but we'll dive into OS version. Then we'll click through and start configuring this criteria. So I have a criteria that is OS version. I want it to be less than the latest version of macOS 10.15.0, right? And this will grab every computer that's still running macOS behind 10.15.0. Now, a couple of ways we could do this. We could scope and exclude devices. We could scope and look for a specific slice. That is really up to you. And you can add many, many criteria to building a smart computer group. Folks, if you have not gotten in very deep with smart groups, this is one of the most powerful features in all of Jamf MDM products. Take a look at this. It's a really great way just to make your life much, much easier. Now, what if I need extra time? If I'm looking at this saying, well, I'm almost ready, but I need maybe a couple of weeks, couple of days, couple of months even. These new OSs are coming. They're coming pretty quickly here, and I'm not quite ready. I'm not sure if it's going to break something. What do I do? Well, we leverage delayed OS updates. It's available across the entire Jamf MDM portfolio. So Jamf Pro, Jamf Now, and Jamf School all support this. Well, what does it look like? Again, I'm going to use Jamf Pro, but you can dive into your UI and see this for yourself. So the first thing we'll do here is click on Configuration Profiles, and then, of course, click on New. We'll start building our config profile, scroll down on the left-hand side and click on Restrictions, and then Configure Restrictions here. Now, what's really interesting is we'll get into Restrictions and we'll click over on Functionality, and you'll be given a pretty powerful option here. So I will say, yes, I'm going to defer updates, and now I choose what makes sense for my organization. Do I want immediacy, or do I want safety in delaying for up to 3 months? You've got to take user preference into account, right? Maybe don't delay for 3 months if people are dying to have it, but certainly don't cut yourself short. Give yourself time to test and validate, and then roll out the new operating system. So here's what this could look like. Day 1, 10.15.0 is released. Catalina is out in the wild. We expect this to be sometime in October. And I'm going to say maybe from my organization, Garrett Incorporated, right, this fake imaginary company, I'm going to take 60 days to test and to validate. Well, what happens during that 60-day period if 10.15.1 comes out? Am I ready? What if I'm not ready? What do I do? Well, great question. And what happens is really, really cool. You can actually test and validate in tandem the two different versions of Catalina. So that by the time day 60 rolls around, you're ready to GA 10.15.0, even while you continue to test and validate 10.15.1. And then by the time day 75, 75 days after 10.15.0 was originally released, now we're ready to go and GA on day 75. So a very powerful way just to take control, take the bull by the horns, and be more powerful as an admin. The final thing I want to say here is that you cannot over-communicate this stuff. In all of our experience here at Jamf, I've never encountered a customer that has told me we talk about OS updates too much, and people got sick of hearing when their machine would reset, what they had options to do, and when it would actually force them to do something. Usually the case is the flip side, right? We don't communicate enough, we don't have enough detail. What we really need is to equip our staff to know what's going on, why this is mission critical, and what options they have in front of them. Maybe something like the third bullet on this slide, that you have that availability today, and if you do not make that upgrade by the time that, let's say, Friday rolls around, well, then it's time to force that upgrade for the good of the org, and we're going to force that on a certain date and a certain time. So let's talk about succeeding with deploying macOS. We'll dive into iOS in a minute, but I want to show Catalina first of all. So Apple releases Catalina. Do you want to upgrade? Yes or no? Well, depending on that answer, we'll take different actions. So I could create a policy to block that update, and this is what that would look like. We would go into Jamf Pro's dashboard, under computers, under restricted software, and we could restrict the install macOS. And this says Mojave because Catalina is still in beta at the time of recording, that process name. So I'm creating a restriction within the restricted software tab on Jamf Pro. That's a policy that will automatically block this across any computers I assign that policy to. Very powerful way to do this at scale. Of course, I can also defer with MDM. We walked through this just a minute ago, but up to 90 days, I can defer that update, leveraging that MDM profile. Very easy to do across the board, leveraging delayed OS updates. And again, Jamf Pro, Jamf School, Jamf Now, they can all do that. You also have the option of installing or allowing the installation of beta releases. Maybe that makes sense for your teams, maybe not. Maybe it's too risky. You can uncheck that box underneath the Software Update tab and appropriately scope that profile as needed. Now, if you want to allow this update via the Mac App Store, the end user will download it from the App Store, just like they already know how to do. No IT interaction required, and caching servers can help with that load that will be created for downloading this from the App Store. A couple of things there just to keep in mind, and of course a cheeky call out here that again, we've got a screenshot from Mojave. I switched out that icon so it's Catalina, but it still says Mojave, Catalina coming soon, of course. Your second option is to let IT install this automatically, leveraging an MDM command to force that upgrade, to push that upgrade to Catalina. Now you can either have that do a download, or on the flip side, do a download and install. It kind of depends on how you want that experience to be for the end user. If you want to kick it off right away, you can make that choice. We can also, of course, leverage policies, a very powerful part of Jamf Pro. So I'm in policies, you can see on the right-hand side there underneath General, and we can configure this pretty quickly. We will upload the installer to Jamf Pro, deploying that, leveraging two policies here, caching it, first of all, and then running the command you can see here, start OS install with a script. If any of this is out of your depth, maybe you've never cached anything on client Macs, maybe you've never run a script period with Jamf Pro and you're relatively new, two recommendations. Check out the Jamf 100 course and get in touch on jamfnation.com or with your support rep. Talk to us. We are always here to make sure that you succeed. Now, the other way we can do this is that the end user, installs this via self-service with a policy. Same kind of rundown here, very, very similar to this previous slide right here, but we're doing this through self-service. So we'll zoom back out. You can see if I want to keep my data and I want to deploy Catalina, we've got the 3 options we just touched on in blue. User installs with self-service, IT installs automatically, and the Mac App Store. But what if I want to install Catalina but wipe the data, erase that data? Well, you've got a couple of options here as well. We can use net install, which this is an imaging workflow. Be aware, I'm going to walk through this in just a minute. You can see a little more detail. This will not work if your Mac is relatively new. Any more than a year or 2 old, this is not an option for you. We can also use the erase install command, but we'll get to that in just a second here. If you still run an imaging workflow and imaging in your environment, you certainly can do that. This is labor intensive at scale, but some people prefer it, and in fact, some orgs require imaging. Just a heads up, we really believe that imaging is dead. And ever since Apple introduced the T2 chip, imaging doesn't even work anymore on newer Macs. So if you've got older Macs, a couple years back or beyond, you can still do this workflow. You just need to be aware that it's changing very, very quickly. And very soon, imaging won't be a thing that you can even do on a Mac. So make plans to upgrade and really update your workflow for deploying operating systems at scale, because imaging, Jamf has the opinion that it's dead already. Maybe you're holding on to it, but it's slipping away very quickly. Just be aware. We also have this option to use the erase install commands. Now, you can download this again from the App Store, upload it to Jamf Pro, kind of walk through the same policy setup, but you're seeing a different outcome on the end user side. So erase and install rather than installing the OS and keeping the data. Just need to be aware of what that impact is on that client Mac, on that end user. But if you're good with this and you want a fresh install, by all means, leverage the erase install command. Now, here's what this looks like. I'm going to kick this off, and you can see what erase install actually looks like from the end user's perspective. So we are installing, in this case, High Sierra, because again, Catalina's still in beta. But you can see we're doing the install here, walking through kind of the basic, usual enrollment workflow. This is going to complete very, very quickly here, and I actually think some of this is sped up pretty well just to show us what that looks like. But we'll choose where we are. We're accepting, of course, remote management here. Very basic, just showing that Jamf does manage this machine, this computer. And then creating our local computer account. So Tony Stark, huge fan of Jamf. Great to see that. He's creating his brand new local user account. And then just like normal, our Mac is being set up. Very quick walkthrough there. If you need more detail, feel free again to reach out to us or to Jamf Nation for more assistance. But really zooming back out, whether you're keeping the data or erasing the data, you've got options. Tons of ways to go about this, so keep these in mind as you walk through this year. Now for iOS, I'm going to go through this quickly because it's very similar. If you do want to deploy iOS 13, you can do it with an MDM command, take it on IT to get that done, or do it via the user. So the end user can do it kind of the typical way, as you'll see that little red bubble pop up, indicating you've got that update available, right? And we all kind of love that, at least I do, because it means something new and exciting is available for my device. Love those days. What I really love, though, at scale is that there's no IT interaction. So we don't need our IT team to manage a few hundred devices. So, when they're doing this, they can really step back and let the user take care of that. On the flip side, IT can do it leveraging an MDM command to upgrade to iOS 13. Same thing we walked through last time, but a caveat here, this does require supervision. So keep that in mind. A lot of us do deploy iOS devices. Some are supervised, some are not, but definitely check to make sure that you have supervision before you move through this workflow. You can also defer, of course, the same thing we talked about with macOS, defer up to 90 days. Now, that brings us to the end of our big walkthroughs for macOS, iOS recapping WWDC, I want to leave you with a few calendar marks and next steps. iPadOS coming very soon on September 24th, Catalina in October, and tvOS, we think on the 30th, it could be on the 24th as well. So by the time you're watching this, that may already be in the wild or it may be coming very, very soon. Consider joining us at the Jamf Nation User Conference as well. Whether you're brand new or an old veteran, this is a great way to get to know your fellow admins, talk face-to-face with a few hundred Jamfs that will be there, and hear directly from our executive team on where the roadmap is going. So if you want to hear from me, other members of the product team, where we're driving Jamf Pro and other products, this is the place to be. Find some budget, come join us. It's really a fun time. And I'll also say another call out for Jamf Nation. Just go to jamfnation.com. Join us there. 80,000 plus fellow IT admins, and you don't need to be a Jamf customer. It's really open to anyone. If you want to grab this screenshot here, if you're brand new, use your phone, open the camera, and scan that QR code, and you can grab the upgrade guide for beginners. If you're brand new, this is the best place to start. Leverage this webinar, leverage our support team, leverage Jamf Nation, but go grab this ebook before you dive in. It's a great high-level overview of what it means to manage an OS upgrade cycle. And with that, thank you for joining us here today. I appreciate your time. I appreciate that you are a part of the Jamf Nation wherever you are tuning in from around the world. Have a great day.